On today's show, with the Bucs 30-19 victory over the 49ers, the chants of MVP surrounding Baker Mayfield are getting louder. Are they warranted? And what's the latest with Emeka Egbuka? I'll discuss next on this edition of the Bucs Report. Let's get it! Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. The best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe to the Bucs Report on YouTube and comment anything down below. And the source of all your Buccaneers news is the Bucs Report. .com. So in this edition of the Bucs Report, the Buccaneers continue to keep rolling. And as I prepare for this show from week to week, I think and I brace myself that at some point I'm going to have to come to you guys about a Buccaneers loss. And to be clear here, I don't want to, but it just seems inevitable. But Baker Mayfield continues to keep diving deep. You take a look at the wide receivers, it doesn't matter anymore. Mike Evans out, not an issue. Godwin out, not an issue. McMillan out, not an issue. Egbuka out, not an issue. The Buccaneers continue to keep dominating. What's in the DNA of this year's Buccaneers team? And then a bit later, we'll talk about the Bucs as they prepare to take on the Lions in some Monday night football action. But let's just dive into it here in the first segment. And before I get too deep into it, let's just talk about the box score, because there is a lot to love about this year's Buccaneers team. Baker Mayfield, the chants of MVP are getting louder. 17 of 23, 256 yards. That when Baker Mayfield is down, he's not down and out. And, I think the MVP chants are warranted. I'll talk about that a bit later. But Rachaad White, a huge game, a touchdown. Sean Tucker, a touchdown. Johnson and Johnson, I'm talking Cameron and Tez, touchdowns. That this team is firing on all cylinders. And if you can believe it, they're only going to get better. At least ostensibly, right? You got to think that, Godwin, Evans, McMillan, Egbuka, all of them out there, that this team has just got to be built for truly great things. So let's dive into it in what we saw in the most recent game, where the Bucs down the 49ers by a score of 30-19. To be clear here, this is or was a 49ers team that was facing a lot of injuries as well. As we know, Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, wasn't in the game, his title from so many years ago. Mac Jones was in. And despite the injuries that the 49ers faced, they still made it an interesting fight. But the Buccaneers are victorious. So let's dive into it. I'll talk about the game and then, just the fanfare that's surrounding Baker Mayfield and how does he keep out all of the noise. You think that with all those chants, you'd be walking around with a fat head. You'd have a hard time getting in the doors. I'm going to have to squeeze your head together. Not the case. I think that Baker Mayfield is the guy that remembers where he came from, that he's had to hop, skip, and jump around the NFL to get where he's at, his forever home in Tampa. And I think that that is the rocket fuel within him that continues to propel him forward, despite what we have seen in this early season, that I still think that his eyes are set on the prize, winning the NFC South, and dare I say, winning a Super Bowl listen, guys, I know that the bottom could fall out here at any point, but this team right now is playing some of the best football that, well, I have seen in years. So let's get right into it. And Baker Mayfield making the headlines after what felt like a bit of a miraculous. And this is what I'm talking about. I had to start the game on the radio, which is a treat. The play-by-play for the Buccaneers is top-notch. And then he's down. No, he scrambles. He continues to keep going. He gets the first down. It was one heck of a game. And after, like I said, what felt like a bit of a miraculous scramble and a 45-yard diving touchdown to Tez Johnson, the crowd was chanting, MVP, MVP. But Baker was quick to cool things off and reminded everyone, hey, guys, it's still early. And it is. I think it's important to temper expectations, right? That, I go through my day-to-day life with creamsicle colored glasses on. I don't know about you, but I don't want to say I'm not waiting for the next thing to fall, but you got to know at some point that there's got to be hiccups. I don't want there to be, but it seems all but apparent. But Baker Mayfield saying we've got a lot more work to do. He's playing with confidence. You can hear and feel, but he's not buying into the noise. And I'll dig a little bit deeper into the MVP chance a bit later in the show. But, what stood out to me on that play, how willing he is to take chances. And, that seems like an easy thing to do. Just take a chance. Go ahead and do it. Well, if you can do it tactfully and if you can, execute well, because Jameis Winston, if you can remember famous Jameis Winston, the guy that's going to eat the dub, he also was the kind of guy that liked to take chances. And, well, very often those turned into interceptions. And that is something that plagued Baker Mayfield last year, for example, and earlier in his career. But this is the absolute best Baker Mayfield I have ever seen. And that's something. But like I said, what stood out in that play is how willing he is to take chances. He scrambled for a 3rd and long. He picked up 15 yards. Then he hit Tez for the big score. That sequence showed you the dual threat he brings. He's got the arm, he's got the legs, he's got the heart, he's got what it takes. And that particular sequence put a big exclamation on the 30-19 victory. Bam! At Ray J. And a fist-pumping moment. And you can have those even on the radio side. I know it's preferable to watch all the games on television, but I'm here to tell you that the Bucs radio broadcast really brings me into it as well. But here's the reality check. The MVP chants are fun. They make for headlines. They make for clicks. And I get it. Baker's playing some of the best football of his career, like I said, but he did it on Sunday with essentially one starting skill player on the field. And not to be lost in all of this is Cade Otton. Wow, this guy is a beast out there. And he got thrown around where he tried to jump and the guy lifted him up and threw him down. That this guy is really built for warfare. But Cade Otton was the only starting playing on defense. Emeka Egbuka left with a hamstring issue. Yes, it was just the last episode of the Bucs Report that I came to you guys and I said that other than Baker Mayfield, that is the absolute worst case scenario. And well, it came true. And what do you know? What do you know? That the running backs, right? They picked up the slack. Rachaad White, getting a touchdown. Tucker out there. Johnson & Johnson. That this team, like I said, and it's almost the makings of a movie, if you ask me, that all that they have been able to accomplish in this early season. But, quite stunning what they've been able to do. But Emeka Egbuka left with a hamstring issue. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were not active, and it didn't matter. And I think that is quieting a lot of the critics that, this team is good. You got Evans in there. You got Godwin in there. But if you pull anyone out of there, that Buccaneers team is just a deck of cards, and I'm willing to throw the middle fingers up to say, maybe you better check the box score because it didn't matter. Take away our big weapons. We're still going to find a way to stick it to you. And that context matters. If you're going to judge Baker long-term, you have to see him carry the team with the roster, even even without key players on the team. And what is that? You have got that result with less of quarterback, maybe, but maybe not. I think Mayfield, I know that Baker Mayfield is the guy stirring the drink for the Bucs, that the players love playing for him. And that's the thing that is said as well, is the players that played under the Brady years and the players that have played under Baker Mayfield, they actually prefer playing under Baker Mayfield better. He's just one of the guys. It's not going out there and playing with dad. So exciting as a Bucs fan as this team continues to fire on all cylinders. All right, so after the break, we'll continue to talk about the Baker Mayfield MVP buzz. I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network, simulcast on the Bucs Minutecast feed, part of the Fans First Sports Network. So the MVP chants are getting louder. And are they founded? You better believe it. He is one of the best, if not the best, quarterbacks in the National Football League. And that's quite a statement. And I know you could throw some names in there. You could throw, Mahomes and, different other quarterbacks in there. But for me, he's right there. He's right in the conversation as the greatest quarterback in the NFL right now. I really have no doubt about it. And again, I'm not saying that just because, I'm a homer for the Bucs. I really do believe what I'm saying here. But it's important to keep the noise aside. And that's what Baker Mayfield has had to do and maybe struggled with it a little bit here. So we're going to start here in the next segment with Baker Mayfield. He has been playing some ridiculous ball. And the crowd chants of MVP after some of those plays. And it's interesting that after Johnson got his first touchdown, they're like, MVP. And they're like, for me? I mean, this is the first time I played. And they're like, no, man. It's about Baker Mayfield. And a team that's playing so well around him. And what you saw in the games, you saw him scramble. You saw the throw. The one he escapes a 3rd and long, spins out of trouble, and then drops a beautiful 45-yard bomb on Tez Johnson. There it goes. That play had people losing their minds. And the noise in the stadium, it was legit. That is for sure. But Baker, classic Baker, tried to tone it down and said, it's week 6 here, and we're just getting started. Let that resonate with you. We're just getting started. And, all that's at stake here. He wanted to keep the team grounded. The quote was in Jenna Laine's piece over on ESPN that said, week 6, kind of temper expectations. Now, look, there's praise coming from a lot of different quarters. And it's interesting because this team has been brushed aside season after season after season, but finally the Buccaneers are getting their flowers. And it's early in the season to be getting flowers, but gee, thank you. That's where the Bucs are at right now. And the MVP talk is fun for fans. It makes for hot takes on social media. It makes the headlines. It's part of the narrative. But for a team like the Bucs, the smarter move is to keep the head down, keep the process, and protect the win streak. I've seen this before. Last season, for example, and the bottom fell out there for a bit. They still rallied, but this team is built better. And that's the one thing. Baker's saying it's week 6. We're just getting started. That tells me he's trying to keep guys hungry and accountable because complacency will get you nowhere. That's leadership. That is veteran stuff there. That's why the room is buying the output. But let's not gloss over the pure entertainment value. And honestly, after a few of those big plays, I had to chuckle because Baker's swagger and grit make him a storyline material. He's a fun guy to watch. Some guys are out there, they're just stoic, they execute, and they move on to the next one. He's a showman. He is a fun guy to watch on the field, generally playing well, but still a fun guy to watch. And if the offense keeps clicking, people will keep chanting and the headlines will keep coming. But let's not divorce the narrative from reality. We still need health and we still need depth because now, stop the clock, is that now with all the pieces that are missing, it will really get real. And I'll talk about the injuries a little bit later in the show, but the Buccaneers are definitely, and I'm not trying to say this as a pejorative or, saying anything detrimental about these players, but they're, getting to the bottom of the depth chart, at least at the wide receiver position. Don't tell that to them because look they put up 2 touchdowns in the last game, but we need guys to come back. And I will talk about that a bit more later in the show, but the Buccaneers rising up. And that is what has me excited, that they continue to keep knocking it out of the park despite what injuries and what setbacks are put in their way. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about those injury concerns. Who's in the game? Who's out of the game? Who are the question marks? I'll break it all down next. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report podcast. So let's take a look at the injury report. There are some players that are emphatically out of the game. They are Chris Godwin, Luke Haggard, Bucky Irving, Josh Williams, and Josh Williams. Questionable are Teddy Bridgewater, Lavonte David, Emeka Egbuka, Mike Evans. Questionable. I would say that they are a long shot, but encouraging signs as well with Mike Evans as he was getting in some practice. So inching closer to return as well. But then, what did we see with Godwin? It's good that they're back, but there's always kind of this, ramp up period, right? Where it takes a bit for them to get up to full speed. But having at some point Evans back out on the field will be huge. Make no mistake. This segment, I want to talk about injuries because football injuries happen. And right now we're juggling a few. And that matters because a hot quarterback and a shaky wide receiver room changes the game plan. Headline 1, Chris Godwin and Bucky Irving are out on Monday Night Football. ESPN reported they were ruled out. That's immediate ripple effect for the game plan. Godwin is a veteran route runner. We know what he brings to this team, especially when he's healthy. He's dependable in the seam. Losing his arm means others have to step up. Questionable is Emeka Egbuka, the rookie. Left the game with a hamstring issue. That's the kind of thing we watch closely with young receivers. You don't want to push them back too fast, so the receiving depth chart gets thinner, which, pushes more depth to whoever's healthy. So that makes it an interesting storyline to follow as well. So what does this mean, and what does the roster look like? I open up the official Bucs roster, and the injury report is worth noting. Everybody doing the same in the morning before a game. Those pages listed who is limited. And I will go down into depth a little bit more about the players that are going to be in and out of the game because, I know that this team has faced a lot of setbacks, but at some point, like I said, we are going to need some of these players to come back. But Chris Godwin, like I said, he is officially out with a fibula issue. That's a big name to lose. He's reliable. He's consistent. We know he's been out. Losing him changes how defenses can play. Evans out. Seeing Mike back on the field, even in limited fashion, is encouraging. He draws attention. He helps the run game by pulling coverage if he's available. Even at 70%, he's a huge positive because he forces teams to respect the vertical threat. Emeka Egbuka, my man, the guy that has absolutely knocked it out of the park in his rookie season here. And a lot of people, why did they draft another wide receiver? Do you know now? The kid has been absolutely amazing. Leads the team in catches and has been a consistent piece of the offense. He was limited in practice and is a game time decision. If he's out, that puts even more pressure on a thin receiving group. What does that mean? Well, that means Sterling Shepard, right? That he is going to factor in the Johnson & Johnson. I expect more from Cade Otton. Expect more, from Rachaad White and from Tucker. Because Bucky Irving out, losing Bucky, again, a blow. He's been electric, and he gives the offense a multi-dimensional edge. When he's out, then Rachaad White and Sean Tucker and whoever else they activate need to produce. That changes the game script. You run different concepts if you're missing that home run threat. So those are, the moves and the depth and practice squad moves. The Bucs did not shuffle bodies on the practice squad in the roster earlier this week. They brought in Michael Wiley to the 17-man practice squad. That tells you they're bracing for bodies missing and want options. So you take a look at it. We're hoping that a lot of these players are going to come back sooner and sooner. But the good thing, the reassuring thing for me is they're finding a way to rally around with these players out of the mix. So the game plan adjustment in plain English here is with Bucky out and the running back snaps go to Rachaad White and Sean Tucker. White is, of course, that veteran who can shoulder the load. Tucker gives a change of pace. If Josh Williams is out, the Bucs will need to be cautious with rookie usage. They will protect the quarterback from third down sets and expose him to hit or pressure. So I'm not concerned, and maybe I should be, with how the Buccaneers are playing. Like that I said that, they continue to find a way to keep rising above. But they're getting put to test here. And, the last piece that we really need to cross our fingers and toes on is Baker Mayfield, because things are going to change exponentially if he is out of the mix. At some point, knock on fake wood here, I hope that doesn't happen. But it just seems like you're playing a game of odds at some point where you do whatever it takes to get the first down. But at some point, you're going to get hit and the rubber's going to meet the road. And then it's going to be Teddy Bridgewater or whoever else. So we really need to protect the man, Baker Mayfield, because he is a big part of the Buccaneers' success. The biggest part, I guess you could say. All right, next, let's talk about the game itself. Monday Night Football in Detroit. And, you take a look at the standings right now. The Buccaneers are 5-1. They are tied with the Indianapolis Colts as having the best record, 5-1. And, it's kind of hard to believe that we're in the position that we're in. And I say that just based on the fact of all the injuries and all the players that are out. But talking about Detroit, 4-2, second place in the North. But the one thing I know, they are going to throw it at the Bucs. They're not going to take it easy. And this is a team as of late that has shown that they can really answer the bell. But that is the game. Monday night, I know that Baker and a lot of the guys say they don't, generally like playing night games, especially the nationally televised games. If you look at them historically, they don't necessarily favor the Bucs. But primetime Monday night, Bucs versus Lions. Two teams near the top of the conference. This is a heavyweight championship. You got Jared Goff, you got Jahmyr Gibbs, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown doing his Amon-Ra St. Brown thing. You got a Bucs defense that's starting to hum. It's going to be a chess match. Schemes and matchups and small edges matter more than just hype. And I think that, Baker has the right idea, right? And he's kind of, let that be known amongst, the players to kind of just keep your attitude in check. We haven't done anything yet. That this season is still fairly early, and there's a lot of football that needs to be played, and we want to have our eyes on the prize, and we don't want to get distracted too much by someone jingling car keys telling you that you're the greatest team in the NFL. So I think that is important. But here are the players to look for. Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Jacob Parrish. St. Brown is a chain mover, a consistent volume target for Goff. Parrish is the rookie nickel who has been impressing since camp. He brings speed and attitude. If Parrish can slow down St. Brown enough, the Bucs defense can hang on with other threats. Other things, if you're Todd Bowles, you have to decide if you shade safety help to get the slot or trust the nickel to hold. If you overcommit to stopping St. Brown, you open up Jamel on the ground. If you don't, St. Brown will pick you apart. Love those choices. They make the game fun. And the thing of it is I know that they're going to have their hands full. They absolutely are. And, you take a look at it, the Buccaneers have the better record, but don't read too much into that. You don't want to fall into what is a trap game. On the other side, Baker Mayfield needs to be sharp. not too worried about it. If Egbuka is at least limited, and what is said is that he wants to play. He said that he wants to play, but of course, the medical team is going to have to approve that first. But I think that we need him in there. That we're really thin. That I listed earlier the players. I'm talking Sterling Shepard. I'm talking Johnson & Johnson. I'm talking Otton. I'm talking the running backs, those kind of things. But you need more options at the wide receiver position. I don't want to say the Buccaneers got lucky in the last game, but you don't want to test it too much. Time of possession, third down efficiency, and staying physical at the point of attack will matter. The Lions will test the Bucs front with their run game, so protection, screens, and staying balanced is the plan. This one feels like a playoff dress rehearsal to an extent because, the Lions have been good here for the last couple seasons. And, this could very well be, what's going to happen at the end of the season. Two really great teams, and which one will reign supreme. Both teams are built to move and handle pressure. Every matchup matters. Special teams, penalties, red zone trips, those little things decide primetime games. So we're hoping that Chase McLaughlin is dialed in too, right? And all things considered has, played pretty well since that one debacle game where he was less than stellar. But I'm talking closing takedown. If I had to pick the single biggest swing, if the Bucs linebackers and nickels can make those third down stops, and if Dean keeps showing up with game-changing plays, the Bucs can control the game. If the offense can stay balanced and get Egbuka involved even a little, that is advantageous. So big things. And not to be lost in all of this, as well as Jamel Dean and what kind of game that he has. Definitely in a prove-it phase of his career. A guy that is injury-prone. And when you are in the kind of situation that he's in where he needs to prove it, and that will hinge on his future in the NFL, I think that at the end of the day, at least in part, that is why you are seeing the absolute best out of Jamel Dean. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. Again, for all of your Buccaneers news, head on over to thebucsreport.com. They got you covered up, down, left, right, with all the news surrounding your favorite team and mine. All right, listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report, and I'll talk to you again next time.